Okay, so I don't want to become the starter set guy, but there's something quite satisfying about seeing what I can get out of the beginner kits that Warhammer and other miniatures makers put together. Before we jump into this, I need to put a big old caveat out there for everyone who is just foaming at the mouth to comment on how they'd be pleased with the results and how I should stop complaining about my work. I've been painting for years, and although I am glad that there are beginners watching this, it is for you, I'm under no illusion that my results from this box may not be consistent with your results. That's okay. I'm aware that I'm often telling you that I'm not happy with my results while showing you something that you would be more than happy with. And if you're hearing that and looking at something that's better than your efforts, that's where I end up discouraging you rather than encouraging you. That isn't my intention, so first of all, I am sorry about that. What I want this video to be is a way to show you what's possible for me. I'm the one prattling on and messing about with that excuse for a paintbrush after all. I want this to be useful for you, but remember, I can be sarcastic, and I like to be a bit of a grump about things too. It's just who I am. I find it entertaining. If you don't, that's also fine. I don't mind if you find other YouTubers to watch. There are plenty out there. Fill your boots with rocks and walk into the sea. Don't do that. Anyway, now we've got that out of the way, I can give you the dirty little details about this little box, and we can listen to my dulcet tones through a different microphone. Over to you, voiceover me. Thanks, introduction me. So you know the drill by now. I've done a few of these. I'll crack the box out, I'll build the minis, blah blah, you don't need to see all that. Jesus Christ. I'll paint the minis and talk garbage for a bit, that's my shtick, and we'll use everyone's favourite brush, the Citadel Starter Brush, for the first mini, at which point it will almost certainly hook and become pretty useless. And then I will switch to my Hawk Miniatures round number 2 brush, which you can get for under £4, and he posts to Europe and the USA. So, no excuses. Alright, here we go. Stormcast Vindictors. Goldus Sigmarius Marinus. We're putting the dick in Vindictus. As we're used to with Warhammer, there's no primer, so we're just raw dogging that gold all over this fella, slapping it on like we're painting a garden fence. Bra stuff. Because we're all in debt to the mighty Duncan Rhodes, this will require a second coat. The consistency of the gold here is, it's alright to be honest, but you'll see thinner areas where the grey of the plastic comes through, and there's often a bit of a green tint to them. We don't have the luxury of a brown in this set, chance would be a fine thing, so we'll just have to get this base coat consistent and hope nobody knows we didn't prime it. Our little secret. I also fired the shield off to get the brush into all the bits and promptly forgot that I'd taken it off, meaning I thought I was done but realised I had to bang it back on to finish the first coat. What a fanny. As I did the second coat, it really occurred to me that giving beginners miniatures with shields kind of forces you to consider sub-assemblies. I'd say it might be a touch early in a painter's journey to be having to do sub-assemblies on their first ever minis, but hey, who am I to judge? There might have been a good reason for Warhammer to pick these specific miniatures to put into the starter set. Working over the second coat, I was a bit more methodical about the areas I painted, since it's harder to see what you've painted and what you've not, and this way I could be reasonably sure that I'd covered all the parts that would end up gold. The shield was done on the back before attaching it and painting the parts on the front that were relevant. All in all, this has gone quite well so far. I know it's been one colour, so big whoop, but the brush is holding up so far and the coverage on the gold is pretty decent. Next, we'll get the silver on there. I checked the box, but there's not really any big pictures of the end result there, so I assumed that all the bits, which are white, were actually silver, and I ended up painting way more silver than I needed here. From here, I think we'll just slap on some blue. Again, it needs 2 coats to get reasonable coverage and stop the gold shining through. My approach here was to work around the bits I'd wrongfully painted silver, and I can't work out if it's easier to paint around these bits or to paint over them later with white, having just painted the whole thing blue. When that dries, our next step is going to be slapping on Agrax Earthshade like there's no tomorrow. While I waited for the paint to dry, I had a peek at Warhammer's online artwork for the Vindictors, and turns out the bits on the shield and the shoulder pads that I'd done in silver are actually white, so I'm going to sort that later on. Washing was fairly simple, so you just need to be aware of how much you're putting on. For the gold parts in shadow, you can go a bit harder than the gold upper areas, and for things like the silver, you'll see me load less onto the brush and pull more of it off, so you don't end up making the silver too muddy with the brown wash. Normally I would wash silver with Nuln Oil, but we don't have that in this set. After the main Agrax was dry, I popped the shield on a makeshift holder and I did the back of it first, and while that dried, I went round some of the gold areas on the main miniature with a more watered down gold mix. I lightened up some of the areas where the wash had just darkened the panels a bit too much. I keep forgetting to go back and do the silver on the hammer too, so let's do that next. Following that, we can look at the white on the shield and the shoulder pads, since I completely read that wrong earlier and assumed it was silver. And then one of the last-ish stages is popping on our texture paint. It's insane to me that you get a texture paint instead of a nice brown, but anyway, let's fuck this brush up completely by using it to spread sand, glue and paint all around the base. Warhammer will sell you the world's most pathetic spatula for this, but just get an old brush, or heck, even a bit of old sprue, and use that, since you don't want to clog anything up with all the nasty stuff in technical astrogranite. One little detail is in the bone on the base, and I'll do that in white so that when I come to wash the whole base in Agrax it darkens and at least looks a little bit like a bone. So now I need to wait for that to dry for like the entire afternoon. When it's dry we can wash the base with Agrax and give it a bit more definition, and then I think we'll be more or less done. I'd like to say it's rubbish, but actually I'm pretty pleased with how it turned out. It's not competition winningly good, but it's a solid 3 out of 5. And if you can get even close to this sort of result, you should be pleased. I do feel like, despite the sub-assemblies, these miniatures are easier to paint than Space Marines. Okay, now, I've got a fun story to tell you. I thought I'd be clever for the next two, and for the first one I'd spray it brown so that the gold looked great over the top, and then for the other one I'd figure something else out. And I had a look in my spray cans collection and I found Lead Belcher, so that felt like a better start too. So I popped out the back and I sprayed Lead Belcher on one and then brown on the other. Now the brown was an old Montana gold can that I had from years ago, and in my infinite wisdom I assumed that, hey, of course it would be fine, it's only a few years old and I've only had to replace the nozzle because it was completely clogged, so what could possibly go wrong? Well, this is what went wrong. What a fucking disaster. Horrible and lumpy. This is precisely what not to do. The Lead Belcher spray turned out okay, but we'll deal with that later. Let's see what we can salvage from this absolute monstrosity of a spray job. I guess the first step is gold again, but this time with a brown base. It should look better, except because this base coat is like the surface of fucking Mars, this should be hilariously awful. At least I have my better brush now. I absolutely blasted through this one because I was livid. I was painting furiously, and you can't see it, but I was shaking my head and cursing myself for being such a moron. Gold first anyway, and I took the shield off, painted the back of it, and then popped it on and did the front parts. Silver was next, and at least I wasn't wasting time painting bits that weren't meant to be silver here, and then the white parts after that. And because I did them before the blue, I could go wild with the mess in aid of getting good coverage. I'd be going back and painting in between with the blue, so this order meant that I could be messy. More messy than this disaster piece already was anyway. 2 coats of the blue paint now, being careful not to go over the white detail, and then I just put an absolute blast of Agrax Earthshade on it to finish it off. I was absolutely done with this one by the time I got to the basing, but I still managed to muster the energy to paint the skull white so that when I did my final base wash over the dried texture paint, it would brown up like a bone. Ish. I hope. Right, moving on. For the last Stormcasts, I thought I'd treat myself to a few different paints to see if I could give you a different approach that doesn't involve fucking the miniature fully up the arse before you paint it. So let's go the speed paint approach. I'm going to wash Nazdreg Yellow, which is a Citadel contrast paint, all over the silver to give me a gold colour. So I promptly spaffed that on, being careful to leave the silver bit silver, otherwise it would sort of defeat the purpose of having that nice lead belcher base coat. Again, this needs to dry, so I basically left it for an absolute age of Sigmar. There was no benefit to doing the blue as a contrast paint, so I just based that on in all the necessary places. I also meant to film that, but somehow didn't, so yeah, there you go, we all make mistakes. Anyway, this time I figured I'd go for the blue first, then white over the top, which felt like a more precise approach because I had a better brush tip to work with. After that, I got a contrast deep red called Flesh Terror's Red, and I used that for a nice pop of colour on the gems and the hammer handle and the sword handle. For the shoulder pad white, I wanted a bit more contrast, so I used Apothecary white there over the top of the existing white that I'd painted on, and that should give it a bit more definition. I also decided I wanted some lighter highlights on the armour, so it was time for a wee dry brush. Cue my Ace Drybrush set from Cryptic Cabin. Ethically sourced goat hair linked in the description below. Maybe not quite absolute starter friendly prices, but for 25 quid you get a brilliant set of dry brushes. Necron Compound was the paint to use, and I wiped plenty off before going in. The trick with dry brushing for me is to really wipe basically all the paint off the brush before you use it, and it'll feel like nothing is going onto the model, but trust me, it builds up really nicely that way. Lastly, before the basing goop, is a quick wash of Nuln Oil on the silver skirt and hammer. We already had enough contrast on the gold from the contrast paint, I felt, so we were good with Nuln Oil. Then we bang on the Astrogranite. So, 3 approaches. I will let you decide which you prefer. I'm going to assume it's absolutely not the second one because that was an abomination. Unless you've got the hots for the Thing from Fantastic Four, in which case, fill your boots with rocks and walk into the sea. I think I'm most happy with the third effort. The white is tight, the finish on the gold feels less orange, and it was actually really enjoyable to paint. Let me know which you prefer in the comments, and if you've got any other questions, comments, whatever you like, hit me up or join the Discord and say hello. If you want feedback on your minis, or you want to show off your latest creation, then head on over, it's linked in the description. If you want to see what I paint normally when I'm not spraying brown crap onto my models, you can find me on Instagram at AlexPaintsTinyThings, and I really appreciate everyone's likes and subscribes. Hitting that YouTube subscribe button is free, and it'll give you more of my videos. Hitting likes helps YouTube's stupid algorithm know that I'm doing the right thing, and it pushes my video to more people who might benefit, so it all helps. That's us for now, no piece to camera to finish off today, just these Stormcasts. Go watch some other videos, and I'll speak to you next time.